Ladies and gentlemen, there is a power available to every human being that is greater than any force on earth. It is the power of prayer. In times of confusion, when your heart is heavy and your path uncertain, prayer is not a last resort. It is your greatest resource. When you truly pray, not just with your lips, but with your soul, you step into a divine connection that lifts, heals, strengthens, and transforms. I have seen broken people made whole, fearful people become bold, weary hearts rise up with joy, all because they discovered the quiet miracle of prayer. And tonight, I want to show you how this simple yet mighty practice can change everything in your life, just as it has for millions. Because when you begin to pray with faith, expectance, and belief, you don't just speak to God, you walk with Him. Prayer is not merely a religious ritual or a spiritual routine. It is a lifeline to the most powerful force in the universe. When a person truly prays, something incredible happens within them. They are no longer just an individual wrestling with life's challenges in their own limited strength. They are someone who has tapped into the infinite. They are now aligned with divine power, flowing directly from God into their heart, mind, and spirit. Prayer opens the heart to God's strength in a way nothing else can. It is like a window being opened in a stuffy room. Fresh air rushes in and the atmosphere changes. When you pray, you breathe in the vitality of heaven. Your burdens begin to lift, your shoulders square up, and your vision clears. Why? Because you are no longer carrying life alone. You have invited the Creator of the universe into your situation, and that changes everything. Prayer doesn't remove the storms of life, but it gives you the inner calm to walk through them with faith instead of fear. Now, understand this, true prayer is not just talking to God. It is not a mechanical recitation of words, nor is it a desperate cry tossed into the sky. Real prayer is an intimate alignment with God's will, His purpose, and His power. When you pray in faith, you align your thoughts with His thoughts, your desires with His plan, and your weakness with His strength. That's when miracles begin to happen, not always outside of you, but most importantly within you. When a man or woman learns to pray, really pray, they discover they are never alone again. They carry within them a wellspring of power that is always accessible. You don't have to wait for the right moment, the right place, or the perfect words. You simply go to God, honestly, openly, and with belief. And in that very moment, divine energy begins to flow. Some people say they feel too unworthy to pray. They believe their past disqualifies them from approaching God. But prayer is not about perfection. It's about connection. Prayer is not for the saintly. It's for the struggling. You can go to God in weakness and come away in strength. You can enter in fear and leave in faith. That is the transformative beauty of prayer. You do not have to be strong to pray. You become strong because you pray. Prayer, practiced daily and sincerely, will bring a quiet but powerful transformation in your life. You will begin to think more clearly, respond more wisely, and walk more confidently. Your mind will begin to reject defeat and dwell on possibilities. You will feel a divine assurance even when the world around you is uncertain. Because prayer plugs you into a source that never runs dry, a power that is always available. The most remarkable people I've met in life weren't always the wealthiest or most educated, but they were people of prayer. They had a steady strength, a humble courage, a peace in their eyes that couldn't be shaken. Why? Because they had learned the secret. When you pray, you draw upon God's strength, and His strength never fails. So, don't wait for a crisis to pray. Don't treat prayer as your last resort. Make it your first response, your daily habit, your constant companion, because when you live a life of prayer, you are no longer limited to your own resources. You are connected to a higher power, guided by a higher wisdom, and sustained by a higher strength. That, my friend, is the beginning of a truly transformed life. Prayer is one of the most powerful tools for transforming the human mind. It is more than a spiritual exercise. It is a renewing force that reshapes how you think, feel, and respond to life. When you begin to pray sincerely, consistently, and with belief, you will notice that your mindset begins to shift. The things that used to trouble you no longer shake you as they once did. Fear, that inner shadow that creeps into the soul, begins to lose its grip. In its place grows a deep and abiding faith, a confidence not in yourself alone, but in a power far greater than yourself. Every person faces anxiety at some point. Life throws unexpected situations, pressures mount, deadlines press in, and uncertainties cloud the horizon. The human mind, when left to its own devices, often chooses the path of worry. But prayer interrupts that cycle. Prayer speaks directly to the anxious heart and says, "Be still. You are not alone." In prayer, you acknowledge the chaos, but choose to trust the one who calms storms. And over time, that trust grows. Anxiety doesn't always vanish instantly, but its influence fades. It becomes less of a master and more of a fleeting thought that no longer controls your decisions. The power of prayer lies in its ability to redirect your thoughts. Where once you expected defeat, you now expect victory. Where you once feared the worst, you now anticipate the best. That is the miracle of prayer. It lifts your thinking. Instead of rehearsing problems, you begin to declare promises. Instead of spiraling into negativity, you rise into gratitude. Prayer replaces the language of despair with the language of hope. It fills your mental atmosphere with possibility, with assurance, with a sense of divine support that no other practice can provide. When you make prayer a daily part of your life, it becomes the filter through which you see the world. You no longer react to everything in fear or frustration. You begin to respond with faith, peace, and clarity. You carry a calmness that defies your circumstances. That's because prayer is more than just words. It's a renewal of the mind. It rewires your thinking and reshapes your attitude. And the more you do it, the more powerful that transformation becomes. Negative thoughts can be relentless. They sneak in through comparison, criticism, bad news, and past regrets. But prayer confronts those thoughts head on. It reminds you of who you are and whose you are. You are not a helpless, hopeless being left to fend for yourself. You are a child of God, deeply loved and divinely empowered. Prayer lifts you out of that pit of negativity and sets your feet on solid ground. It reminds you that your future is not determined by your fears, but by your faith. And the beautiful thing about prayer is that it doesn't require perfect conditions. You don't need to wait until your mind is calm to start. You pray in the midst of the storm. You bring your racing thoughts, your doubts, your worries. And in the act of praying, something holy happens. Your thoughts begin to settle. Your emotions begin to stabilize. A divine peace takes over, not because the world has changed, but because your mindset has. Prayer transforms not only what you think, but how you think. It teaches you to dwell on truth, to expect goodness, to anticipate grace. It shifts your entire perspective. You begin to look for miracles instead of problems. You expect growth instead of defeat. And when that transformation of mindset takes place, you don't just survive life, you thrive in it. You live with confidence, you walk with joy, and you rest in the assurance that God is with you every step of the way. There is a kind of confidence that no amount of success, wealth, or human approval can give. It is deeper than self-esteem and stronger than self-assurance. It is a quiet, powerful, unshakable confidence that comes only from prayer. When you learn to stand in prayer, you begin to stand differently in life. You are no longer walking through the world based solely on your own ability, your own resources, or your own experience. You begin to stand in something higher, God's strength, not your own. That shift changes everything. You begin to see yourself not as the world defines you, but as God declares you, capable, strong, protected, and equipped. Prayer instills a boldness that is not boastful, but deeply rooted in humility. Because when you pray, you are acknowledging that you are not the source of your power. You are connected to a greater power, and because of that connection, you can move forward with courage. It is not arrogance, it is assurance. You don't think more highly of yourself than you ought to, but you also no longer think too lowly of yourself either. Prayer brings balance. It gives you the strength to face challenges, not because you are invincible, but because you are not alone. There is a quiet dignity in someone who prays. You can see it in how they carry themselves, how they respond under pressure, how they rise after setbacks. It's not that they never feel fear, it's that they have learned where to take their fear. Through prayer, they exchange fear for faith. Every time they go to God in prayer, they're reminded that they are not defined by their circumstances. They're reminded that God is bigger than the mountain in front of them. That awareness builds confidence, not a loud, flashy confidence, but a grounded, unshakable one that endures. Prayer also strengthens your inner character. You begin to develop resolve, patience, endurance. You don't quit so easily. You don't panic under stress. You begin to trust that every trial has a purpose and every delay has meaning. That kind of perspective can only come from someone who spends time with God. You can hear it in their words. You can see it in their eyes. They know who holds their future, and that knowledge gives them peace. This is not about pretending to be strong. It's not about putting on a brave face while you're falling apart inside. It's about going to the one who can hold you together when life tries to tear you apart, and after you pray, really pray, you stand taller, you feel stronger, you move with a kind of inner certainty. You may not have all the answers, but you know the one who does. That knowledge, that trust, builds a foundation of confidence that no storm can destroy. The world offers fleeting confidence based on changing factors, how you look, what you achieve, what others say about you. But prayer offers lasting confidence based on unchanging truth. It reminds you that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, that you are never abandoned, and that with God all things are possible. When you pray, you begin to believe those truths not just in theory, but in your bones. And that belief becomes the fuel for courageous action. So if you feel uncertain, overwhelmed, or inadequate, pray. If you're facing something too big for you to handle, pray. If you're afraid to take the next step, pray. Because the moment you turn to God, your weakness becomes a gateway to His strength. And when you rise from your knees, you rise in power. That is what prayer does. It makes you bold, not boastful, courageous, not cocky, strong, not stubborn. It makes you confident, not because of who you are, but because of who walks with you. There are moments in life when the weight of sorrow feels too heavy to carry, when the wounds of the heart are too deep for words, and when the soul aches with a pain that no one else can fully understand. It is in those sacred, vulnerable moments that prayer becomes more than a spiritual practice. It becomes healing. Prayer restores the soul like rain refreshes dry ground. It reaches into the hidden corners of your heart and gently begins the work of renewal. You may enter into prayer with a heavy spirit, but you leave with a quiet peace that surpasses understanding. This is the miracle of true, heartfelt prayer. It restores inner peace and brings emotional healing that no human effort can provide. When you are overwhelmed by anxiety or grief, when your heart is bruised by disappointment or broken by loss, prayer invites you into the presence of the one who understands every tear. You don't have to explain yourself perfectly or say the right words. You simply come as you are, with your raw pain, your tired thoughts, your fragile hope, and in that sacred space something begins to shift. The burden doesn't always disappear instantly, but your ability to bear it grows stronger. The pain may still be present, but it no longer controls you. Through prayer, your spirit begins to breathe again. There is something powerful about bringing your pain before God, not hiding it, not pretending it doesn't exist, but laying it bare in honesty and trust. That kind of transparency is what opens the door for healing. When you pour out your heart before the Lord, you are not speaking into an empty room. You are being held by divine love. You are being reminded that you are not abandoned in your suffering. You are being comforted by a presence that is gentle, kind, and full of mercy. That is why, even in the midst of storms, prayer can bring calm. Because peace is not the absence of trouble, peace is the presence of God. Prayer does not just help you survive hard times. It helps you process them. It gives you a way to release your emotions instead of holding them in. It offers you a sacred outlet to express grief, anger, confusion, and fear, all while remaining wrapped in the safety of grace. That release is part of what brings healing. You stop carrying the weight alone. You let it flow into God's hands, and in return, you receive strength for today and hope for tomorrow. Over time, consistent prayer brings emotional clarity. It helps you untangle thoughts that feel overwhelming. It helps you find perspective in situations that once consumed you. Your heart begins to let go of resentment and bitterness. You start to forgive, not because you forgot the pain, but because you are tired of being its prisoner. In prayer, you discover that peace isn't a distant dream, it's a gift that's been waiting for you all along. Even when your situation doesn't change right away, prayer changes you. It softens the hard places in your heart. It quiets the mental noise. It invites stillness where there was once only stress. And in that stillness, healing flows like a gentle river, subtle but steady. The more time you spend in that sacred space, the more whole you become. Your emotions become more grounded. Your thoughts become more centered. Your heart begins to believe again, to trust again, to open again. Prayer is not a quick fix. It is a healing journey, but every time you return to it, you are reminded that you are deeply loved, fully seen, and never alone. And that knowledge, that assurance, is what ultimately restores your peace and heals your heart. Prayer turns chaos into calm, wounds into wisdom, and sorrow into strength. It is the divine medicine for the aching soul. There comes a time in every life when the path ahead seems uncertain. Decisions press in, options cloud the mind, the weight of making the right choice becomes overwhelming. It is in these very moments that prayer offers something no book, no friend, and no strategy can offer: divine direction and heavenly wisdom. When you pray sincerely for guidance, you open your heart to receive more than human logic. You receive insight that transcends intellect. Prayer clears away the fog and brings a quiet clarity that allows you to move forward, not always with complete understanding, but with complete peace. There is a deep reassurance in knowing that you don't have to navigate life's twists and turns alone. Prayer connects you to the one who sees the whole picture, past, present, and future. When you are unsure which door to open, when you're caught between what looks good and what is right, when you're stuck between the urgency of time and the uncertainty of outcomes, prayer anchors you. It doesn't always give you an immediate answer. It often doesn't shout, but it speaks in whispers of wisdom that echo in your soul. And if you stay long enough in that quiet space, you begin to hear what you need to hear, not what you want, but what will lead you rightly. Prayer is not a vending machine where you insert requests and get instant results. It is a sacred conversation, a divine tuning of your inner ear. Sometimes you leave prayer not with a solution, but with strength to wait. That too is wisdom. There is power in the patience that prayer produces, because often the timing of the answer is just as important as the answer itself. God does not delay out of cruelty, but out of care. He knows what you are ready to receive and when the time is right, the door opens, the sign appears, the peace descends, and you know that you know. The wisdom that comes through prayer often reveals itself in layers. It may come as a strong inner conviction, a subtle shift in desire, or a sudden moment of clarity when things just click into place. Sometimes it shows up through the words of another person, a passage of scripture, or even a quiet nudging in your spirit. However it comes, it carries a weight of truth that cannot be ignored. That is the nature of divine wisdom. It does not confuse, it confirms. It does not pressure, it persuades. And when you've heard it, even if your mind has questions, your heart is at peace. There is no greater peace than knowing you are walking in the right direction. Even if the journey is hard, even if the road is long, if you are guided by divine wisdom, you will not go astray. Prayer is how you stay in alignment with that guidance. It's how you course correct when you drift. It's how you remain open to being led, rather than insisting on leading yourself. And the more you practice it, the more attuned you become to the voice of wisdom. You begin to trust that you are not being tossed by chance, but carried by purpose. Prayer does not always lead you down the easiest path, but it always leads you down the best one. It doesn't promise a life without obstacles, but it ensures that you will have divine direction through every obstacle. That's the promise of a praying life. You don't have to know all the answers. You just have to stay connected to the one who does. And when you do, you'll find yourself walking with confidence even when the road is uncertain, because you'll know that every step is being guided by a wisdom far beyond your own. Prayer is not only a spiritual practice. It is a training ground for character and discipline. In a world filled with temptations, distractions, and pressures to compromise, prayer becomes the firm foundation upon which inner strength is built. It is through daily prayer that a person develops the courage to make better choices, the wisdom to know right from wrong, and the willpower to live with integrity even when no one is watching. Prayer doesn't just prepare you for the moments when it's easy to do the right thing. It equips you for the moments when it's hard, when it costs you something, when doing what's right is not popular but necessary. Each time you go before God in prayer, you enter into a sacred moment of reflection. You confront your thoughts, your motives, your weaknesses, and you invite divine help to rise above them. You admit your struggles, and in doing so, you also find the strength to overcome them. Prayer becomes a mirror, revealing who you are and who you are meant to become. And day by day, as you keep returning to that quiet place, you grow. Your spiritual muscles get stronger. Your conscience becomes sharper. Your heart becomes more sensitive to truth, and your choices become more aligned with it. Discipline is not built by willpower alone. It is built by surrendering your will daily in prayer. You go to God not just to ask for blessings, but to ask for strength. Strength to resist shortcuts, to say no to temptation, to keep walking in honesty even when deceit seems easier. That kind of strength doesn't come from within. It comes from above. And the more you rely on it, the more natural it becomes to choose what is right over what is easy. Prayer trains you to pause, to reflect, and to act with intention. It keeps you from reacting impulsively and helps you respond with purpose. The habit of daily prayer also creates rhythm and order in your life. It becomes an anchor for your day, a reset for your thoughts, a shield for your actions. That consistency builds a backbone of moral strength. Just like the body becomes fit through daily exercise, the soul becomes disciplined through daily connection with God. You learn to guard your thoughts, tame your tongue, and align your actions with your values. And the more you do this, the more you begin to live not by chance, but by choice, not driven by impulse, but guided by principles. Integrity is not built in a day. It is forged in the quiet decisions that no one else sees. And prayer is what gives those decisions power. It reminds you that even when no one is watching, God is. That awareness does not create fear, it creates accountability. It reminds you that your life matters, your choices matter, and your character matters. And that realization shapes the way you live, the way you lead, the way you love. Prayer is not a magic formula for perfection. You will still stumble. You will still face moments of weakness, but prayer gives you the humility to admit your mistakes and the grace to begin again. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you honest. It keeps you growing. And over time, you become a person of deeper strength, clearer vision, and unwavering integrity. In a world that changes by the hour, where values shift and pressures rise, you need something steady, something strong, something sacred. That something is daily prayer. It strengthens your character, sharpens your discipline, and builds within you the kind of life that stands firm no matter what storms may come. There are moments in life when everything seems lost, when doors have closed, when dreams have withered, when hope feels like a distant memory. In those dark and discouraging seasons, it's easy to believe that nothing can change. But that is precisely when prayer becomes the most powerful force in your life, because prayer is not limited by circumstances, not bound by time, and not weakened by human impossibility. When you pray with faith, with sincerity, and with expectation, you open the door for miracles to enter. You invite divine intervention into the impossible. You make room for hope to live again. Miracles do not always arrive with a flash of lightning or a dramatic scene. Sometimes they come quietly, like a sudden peace in the middle of chaos, or a solution you never saw coming. Sometimes a miracle is not in what changes around you, but in what changes within you. Your attitude, your outlook, your resilience. But make no mistake, when you pray, things begin to move in the unseen realm. Heaven leans in, God listens, and slowly but surely, what once seemed immovable begins to shift. That is the power of prayer. It awakens the miraculous, not because you have the power, but because you are calling upon the one who does. Many people give up right before their breakthrough. They stop praying because they think nothing is happening. But faith says, even when I see nothing, I believe something is working. Prayer is the seed that continues to grow underground, even when the soil looks unchanged. Your persistence in prayer is not in vain. Every prayer you speak in hope is like a candle lit in the darkness, pushing back despair. Every time you kneel down and believe, you are releasing a force stronger than fear, stronger than failure, and stronger than defeat. Prayer breathes life into dead places. It revives what was fading and brings strength to what was weakening. Hope is not just an emotion. It is a spiritual force, and prayer fuels that force. When you pray, you are not just wishing for something better. You are declaring your trust that something better is already on the way. That mindset changes everything. It lifts your eyes from the problem to the provider. It shifts your focus from what's broken to the one who heals. And in that shift, your burdens begin to lighten. You may not understand how or when, but deep within, you begin to feel that it will be okay. Some miracles come suddenly, others take time, but prayer teaches you to keep expecting. And in the waiting, hope begins to bloom again. You start to see life not through the lens of what's missing, but through the promise of what's coming. Prayer revives the soul and reminds you that God is not done writing your story. No matter how dark the chapter may be right now, the light is coming. There are still blessings ahead, still new beginnings, still answers waiting to unfold. And when you stay in prayer, you keep your heart open to receive them. Even if you've lost something precious, even if you feel like too much time has passed, prayer whispers, it's not over yet. Because with God, nothing is too far gone. Restoration is real. Healing is possible. Provision is coming. Miracles still happen, and prayer is the key that unlocks that door. So when life feels heavy and your spirit feels tired, don't give up. Pray again, believe again, hope again. Because when you pray, you are not just speaking into the air. You are calling upon a miracle, working God, and where He is involved, nothing is impossible. Prayer lifts the burden, restores the dream, and reawakens the hope that was placed in your heart for a reason. One of the greatest truths you can ever discover is that prayer connects you with a loving, listening God. This is not a distant deity who is too busy to notice you or too powerful to care. This is a father, a friend, a comforter, and a guide. The very act of prayer reminds you that you are never alone. In the silence of your room, in the chaos of your day, in the deepest ache of your soul, when you lift your heart to heaven, even in a whisper, He hears you. Not just your words, but your heart. Not just your requests, but your emotions. He listens because he loves. Prayer is not a monologue, it is a dialogue. It is not one-way communication where you send your thoughts into the sky and hope they land somewhere meaningful. No, prayer is a living relationship. You speak and God hears. You pause and God responds. Sometimes that response is a whisper in your spirit, a verse from Scripture, a moment of peace that cannot be explained. Other times, it comes in the form of guidance through circumstances or encouragement through another person. But always, without fail, the one who created you leans in to listen when you pray. There is deep comfort in knowing that you don't have to fight life's battles alone. You don't have to carry your burdens in silence or walk through pain without support. Prayer assures you that someone is walking with you every step of the way, and not just anyone, but the Creator of the universe, the one who knows every detail of your life and loves you anyway. That kind of love changes how you live. It gives you strength in sorrow, confidence in uncertainty, and joy even in the middle of trials. Sometimes we assume we need perfect words or ideal conditions to pray. But God isn't looking for polished speeches. He's looking for honest hearts. You can go to Him in your brokenness, your confusion, your mess, and your doubt. You can cry, vent, confess, or sit in silence. There is no need to perform for a God who already knows everything about you and still chooses to love you. When you truly understand that God is listening, not as a judge waiting to condemn, but as a father eager to help, it transforms the way you pray. Knowing that God listens also builds trust. You stop feeling the need to control everything because you realize someone wiser is in control. You begin to rest, not because all your problems are solved, but because your soul knows it is being heard. Prayer becomes your place of refuge. The more you pray, the more you realize that you're never really alone, not even for a moment. In the quiet, in the chaos, in the waiting, He is there, listening, loving, guiding, and what's even more powerful is that God not only hears you, He responds in ways that go beyond what you could imagine. Sometimes He answers quickly, other times He asks you to wait, but in every season He is working behind the scenes on your behalf. His timing is perfect, His wisdom is flawless, and His love is unconditional. All you need to do is stay connected through prayer. When you embrace prayer as a relationship rather than a routine, it becomes your source of peace, your anchor in the storm, and your daily reminder that you matter to God. You are not just another voice in the crowd. You are heard, you are seen, you are known, and in every moment of life, no matter how joyful or painful, you are never, ever alone, because prayer connects you to the heart of a God who listens, loves, and will never let you go. Believe with all your heart, pray with unwavering faith, and walk forward knowing that with God beside you, there is no obstacle you cannot overcome, no dream you cannot reach, and no mountain too high for the power within you to climb.